The night at Harbor Lights began like so many others. Outside, the city lights flickered on one by one, turning the skyline into a glittering constellation of steel and glass. Couples strolled down the boardwalk by the waterfront, laughter floating on the breeze, while inside the restaurant, soft jazz hummed from a live trio tucked into the corner. The warm glow of amber chandeliers lit up the polished wood floors and white tablecloths. For most guests, it was a night of celebration, of indulgence, of forgetting the troubles of the world. For Emily Carter, it was just another night of exhaustion. She adjusted the black apron tied tightly around her waist and smoothed her crisp, white shirt before stepping out from the back hallway. The smile she wore was practiced, a mask perfected through years of waiting tables. Behind it was a swirl of fatigue, worry, and the quiet longing for a life she once imagined for herself. At 23, Emily hadn't expected to still be here, balancing trays and memorizing orders, scraping together enough tips to make rent. She had been a finance major once, bright-eyed and ambitious, poring over textbooks filled with formulas, graphs, and case studies. Her dream had been Wall Street, or maybe the financial district closer to home. Any place where she could wear sharp suits, manage portfolios, and make numbers work magic. But life, as it so often did, had other plans. Her father's health collapsed suddenly. Medical bills stacked up like bricks in a wall she could never climb. She dropped out of school to support him and her younger brother, trading lectures and study sessions for endless shifts in restaurants just like this one. Somewhere along the way, her dream had been folded up and tucked into a drawer she rarely opened. Tonight, though, something felt different. The restaurant buzzed with an unusual tension, as if the air itself carried an extra charge. It wasn't until Emily glanced toward table 7 that she realized why. The man sitting there didn't fit the usual crowd of lawyers, professors, and anniversary couples. He was composed, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that fit so perfectly it had to be custom. His hair was silver at the temples, neatly combed back, his jaw sharp, his posture commanding. The kind of man who looked as if he belonged not just in a boardroom, but at the very top of it. Emily's heart skipped. She knew that face. She had seen it more than once on the muted television her father always kept tuned to the finance network, his voice booming through the screen about mergers, markets, and vision. Alexander Grayson, billionaire, investor, a man whose fortune was large enough to shift entire industries with a single decision. He was here, in this modest yet refined restaurant, sitting casually at a corner table with another man, someone younger, slicker, his suit slightly flashier, his smile too easy. Emily adjusted her tray, her pulse quickening. She didn't want to stare, but it was impossible not to. People like Grayson didn't usually appear in the ordinary lives of waitresses trying to pay overdue phone bills. Carrying a pitcher of water, she approached with careful steps, rehearsing the usual greeting in her head. When she reached the table, she noticed something peculiar. Grayson wasn't just sipping wine and talking. His left hand rested lightly on the stem of his glass, fingers drumming rhythmically. His right hand held a pen, which moved swiftly across a napkin. It wasn't doodles or idle scribbles. They were numbers. Long chains of them, stretching across the paper in neat rows. Multiplication, percentages, ratios. An entire calculation sprawled across that fragile square of cloth. Emily's curiosity sparked instantly. She had spent years buried in numbers, and though she had left that life behind, the part of her that loved precision and problem-solving never quite faded. She tilted her head subtly, pretending to adjust the placement of the water glasses. The digits came into view, and for a split second, her breath caught. At first glance, everything looked logical, a flow of projected returns and percentages. But then, almost hidden like a shadow among the numbers, she spotted it, a misplaced decimal point. A tiny shift, barely noticeable, but enough to turn an outcome on its head. Her mind raced. That one error changed the result dramatically. Instead of modest but steady gains, the numbers ballooned into false promises of enormous profit. It was the kind of mistake that could fool someone into believing an investment was gold when it was actually quicksand. Emily stepped back, heart pounding. Was it really what she thought? She blinked, checking again, replaying the equations in her head. Yes, she was certain. She had solved problems like this hundreds of times in her old finance classes. The yield calculation was off by a factor of 10. A minor slip of the pen to most eyes. But to someone like Alexander Grayson, it could mean millions lost in an instant. She bit her lip, torn. What business did she have looking at his notes? She was a waitress. He was a billionaire. The worlds they lived in weren't just separate. They were galaxies apart. Even if she said something, what were the chances he'd listen? More likely, he'd see her as intrusive, overstepping her place. Still, the numbers burned in her brain. She poured the last of the water, murmured the standard line, "Is there anything else I can bring for you right now?" and stepped away. But she couldn't leave it behind. From the corner of her eye, she watched as Grayson's associate leaned closer, voice smooth and insistent. "This is the opportunity of the decade," the man was saying, his hand sliding the contract across the table. "Everyone else is blind to it. But with your capital, your influence, we can make it soar. The projections prove it's airtight." Grayson listened quietly, eyes narrowed, pen hovering above the paper. His expression gave nothing away, but Emily saw the faint tension in his jaw, the way his fingers still tapped against the glass. Her pulse quickened. That decimal point, that tiny fatal error. He was about to sign something built on sand. Emily returned to the kitchen, tray against her hip. But the sound of her heartbeat was louder than the jazz band, louder than the chatter of guests. Her conscience warred with her fear. Was it her responsibility to say something, or would speaking up ruin her? She remembered her father's voice, hoarse from illness but steady with conviction. "If you see something wrong, Emily, you don't stay quiet. Even if the world says it's not your place." She closed her eyes for a moment, steadying herself. She knew she couldn't unsee what she had seen. That decimal point glared at her like a beacon, demanding action. And so, though her knees felt weak and her hands trembled slightly, she began to walk back toward table 7. Rehearsing words she wasn't sure she'd have the courage to say.